Thank you, Paula. This is going to be a talk about acronyms, not about design. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, TED is an acronym. How many of you know what TED stands for? I'll bet there are some of you who have not thought about the fact that TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. That's a cluster that began these talks maybe 25 or 30 years ago now, in which all of these elements that create life forces are brought together in the mind of Richard Saul Wurman, who was the progenitor of this project so many years ago. But there are other acronyms that relate to, and I think perhaps even supersede what TED stands for, that are more inclusive, but are related to what design, technology, and art can uniquely do. So my talk, and by the way, these are all acronyms as well, so thank you all to the sponsors. But what is DAT? What is DAT? What's DAT? DAT is design, art, and technology. Each one of those freeze-framed into a word that activates each one of those synergistically together. Design, art, and technology. A new combination of words, a new acronym that I want you to remember, because it's going to become extremely important here in this area, as it has been over the decades and centuries before. Now, design is making life work more beautifully. When you think about the fundamentals of how design captures the functionality of objects, or even of thinking, and puts them in context that makes them work better than ever. Think about that favorite chair. What makes it so comfortable? Somebody had to think about that. When you walk around in stores, when you walk on the street, when you're in the hospital, when you're at home, every single object that you put on your body, that you use to eat with, that you sit upon, that you bathe in, has been designed by somebody to do something. And if you carry that thought in your mind and you walk around every day and think about that, that's exactly what will bring you close to the essence of design. Some things work better than others, of course. Now, the arts, art is visualizing life's important questions with skill and imagination. The arts, I've always thought, the visual arts, even music and dance, often ask ineffable questions about which there is no answer, but they're portrayed in ways that create a beautiful sensibility that take you to other places. Design brings you from other places and acts to solve those problems. But art often, in solving those visual problems, creates a world in which those questions can be asked that are ineffable, unanswerable, but in ways that bring you out beyond yourself. A beautiful landscape, a still life, a portrait of someone who's looking off in the distance. Who are they? What are all of the aspects of that person's personality that the artist has tried to infuse in that portrait? Those are questions you ask yourself, of which there may not be any answers, even if you know the biography of that particular person. And technology, we're becoming more and more familiar with what technology means, and of course, both this conference and many of the speakers are far more adept in answering those questions than I. But technology fundamentally, I think, extends the hand and the mind efficiently. Not just the computer or the telephone, but the hammer. That's a technological device when you think about it. So the synthesis of design, art, and technology enhances creativity, expands productivity, and extends the human potential because it mixes the capabilities, the ineffable thoughts, and the practical consequences of thinking about how to solve problems creatively. That's what DAT is all about. Now, I've had, in my fortunate life, a lot of experience with DAT, so I think I know what it means to be centered in that space. But I want to invite you into that space and give you a little bit of my own personal background to give you a sense of how it happens that I am standing here talking to you about it. This is a picture of me in Qatar. this wonderful tiny little peninsula off the side of Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, which is trying to right now reinvent itself. It has all of the resources a small country with about 300,000 citizens could ever hope to have, but they have no infrastructure. They have no cultural resources. They have very small educational capabilities. And so I was brought there by the Emir and his daughter to create a cultural environment, to create a Smithsonian of museums. And in so doing, we put together institutions like the Museum of Islamic Art, an extraordinary institution. Well, I'm not the designer of this, but I wanted to point out that architecture is one of those very important design elements. I should back up and say one thing also about design, art, and technology. Each one overlaps with the other. And in fact, there have been some fascinating books and exhibitions recently that show you how design really is an art, and how art is really a design, and how technology itself has both ineffable questions that we are trying to answer, but also solves them practically and extends ourselves. This Museum of Islamic Art is a place where all of those questions come together in examples through the Islamic cultures. Now, Qatar, which was a Bedouin society, had very few of these things because everything they owned that was important was carried on their backs. They were constantly moving as Bedouins. These objects that come from all over the world represent their culture's greatest aspirations that can serve as examples for the future. So every advancement of humanity comes from DAT. Every advancement comes from that combination of those elements and enriches people's lives during that time. However, design and technology without art can often bring us to these consequences as well. And when you think about our modern society's threats, they often come from putting together a brilliant idea and designing the effect of it without thinking of the tragic consequences that come from it. And that's where art comes in. You add that art back in, that brings up those creative tendencies that answers those ineffable questions that make us human beings. So that creates the synergy for great civilizations. When you think about the Greek and Roman times, Chinese dynasties with the extraordinary buildings and objects that they've made, the Renaissance, with the flowering of Western society, the Enlightenment, and also the Industrial Revolution, particularly important in our country. Even in New Bedford, the Industrial Revolution, which was heralded by the whaling industry that started to enhance this region, and still today through the fishing industry is very important. The design and the building of those whaling boats was a particularly important design element that created the energy and the capabilities of the New Bedford society. The Industrial Revolution coming to New Bedford in the 19th century through the textile industry. Textiles without pattern, without design, are simply fabric. And so the design elements that have added to the textile industry of what really created the momentum that built this society here. Pearpoint Glass Company, another important company in the development of the Industrial Revolution in this region, came from the design of beautiful objects that were sold all over the world. The glass industry, as it is today, really was started here in the New England region with all those natural resources that were available, but it was the creative resources and the technology that came with it that created those marvelous objects. We are now, across the world, involved with the 21st century Industrial Revolution. The industry, of course, is a lot different than it was then and is driven by a lot of new technologies. But, as the New York Times said recently, when designers move in, they bring the vision and the tools. This whole TED conference today is about vision. But I dare say that vision inside what is now fueling the new industrial economy is going to come from DAT. Because DAT creates a force field of creativity that enhances the communities they're in. This is an extraordinary device. It doesn't really do anything, but I thought it was a wonderful image of this force. of this force field. God knows, if anybody in the audience knows what this device does, I'd love to know. It may be finding old spoons and coins in the ground, but at least it illustrates this force field of energy that I think DAT has the capability of bringing. Like this, Apple's headquarters, all those people at those screens down below this image, making interesting objects and filling them with technological solutions to design problems like the new iPhone 7, for example. Closer to home, the synthesis of design, art, and technology in RISD furniture students who are using new materials that could never be dreamed of before, but putting them into useful ways in making things that are beneficial to society. Now, with new tools like the 3D printer, you can make a motorbike. The larger these printers are, the more capabilities they have, the more they will invade our lives with things that have been made in new ways. Of course, the scientific developments that are enabling cars like Tesla, but adding the beauty of those extraordinary designs, again, are examples of DAT. Even these wind power devices, which are beginning to populate our environment and changing the way in which we derive energy, come from the combination of design and technology and art. These are beautiful objects. Now, I know some people who live along the coast don't like to see them, but they are the new beauty of the future and energy. Even fashion through 3D imagery is extending the capabilities of the fashion industry to make objects like this. This is a wonderful design that was recently featured in an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum, and we'll see more of this as time goes on. Now, how can DAT help create New Bedford's next industrial revolution? I dare say we're not going to see those mill buildings and those factory buildings that are currently vacant, filled with the kind of machinery that causes fabrics to be printed, but perhaps there'll be people in those buildings designing those fabrics that are going to be made in 3D printers or in some other methodology that will allow for New Bedford to find itself again. Already, there are examples, harbingers of that new future. The Joseph Aboud Company, which is doing so well here in this area, has brought with it new technologies that are able to design and create beautiful objects that we wear. The education system is beginning to adapt itself to create people who are graduating who could work in these new industries in our region. We need to find ways of capturing them and keeping them here, inspiring them to build young new businesses, as the Co-Creative Center is going to do when it's finished here just along Union Street. Maker spaces, technological desks like those at Groundwork, which are helping people. Yes, let's applaud that. This is where New Bedford's future is coming from. And we need to get behind those young people who are working in those spaces. We need to find them funding. We need to find them markets, and we need to support them because they are the future of this region. And so too are the students who are working at RISD, my old alma mater, in their co-work studio. The synergy that we can create among UMass Dartmouth, among RISD, among MIT Media Lab can all benefit this region if we concentrate those energies and make more out of the sum of their parts. And the trickle down, if I dare use that word in a political season, that can happen through art education, design education, and technological training in public schools, in magnet schools around this region, can help to breed students who have that fascination, that curiosity, and that creative spark that will build perhaps the next new industries for our region. In addition, we want to bring exhibitions of design, art, and technology here to give examples to people in this region so they don't have to go to New York or Boston. Let's do them right here. Let's do them right here in New Bedford, in a place where we can show that energy and bring examples of other energy to inspire us. Design exhibitions as well. It would be wonderful to see great new inventions here that will spur our students and our public to have greater interest. Technology exhibitions like those at the Cooper Hewitt in New York, also things that could sponsor inspiration. And of course, we need to have more incubators. We need to have more places where people can begin to invent their futures using design, art, and technology. What about film? What about new media here? Where do you go in this town to see a really great film? I don't hear anybody answering that question because it doesn't exist. We need a film theater here where great films can be shown to inspire us. But when you think about it, that is everywhere. And through all the social media, all the new media technologies, what we do here can be exported. Not only will we import things to this community, great exhibitions, great films, new incubators bringing new ideas, but we can export those through all those social media aspects that are available to us now. So DAT's values educate the whole community, enliven the city by attracting more creative people and educating those who are here to understand and to love the combination of design, art, and technology. Create this platform for economic development. So 100 years from now, somebody will be standing on this stage giving a lecture about TED at TEDx, and will refer to photographs of people in those Industrial Revolution, as I showed you. That is a way of thinking. This is a young woman who is beginning to extend her hands and fingers, but she's extending her mind also through design, art, and technology. So in New Bedford, let's build those incubators and maker spaces, start up design and technology firms, connect with universities and research centers, economic development assistance, business loans. Where's the business loans? More money for New Bedford. Tax benefits, which we are working with the state legislator for. And let's create a center for design, art, and technology exhibitions and films. And we'll have a community of creative people. So join this vision, and let's bring DAT, more DAT, to New Bedford. Thank you.